Hi, I'm Quintin. I'm a certified Ross instructor out of Middle Tennessee, and today I thought I would do something a little interesting. I recently came across several of these customizable record players for real cheap, and so I thought I would paint a wet-on-wet style scene on the lid of these record players. First thing I did here is I put tape around the outside edge, the walls of this lid. On the inside, I painted with some Bob Ross white gesso, the entire back panel, and then I took some contact paper with an oval cutout and put that on over top of that. That's completely dry, and we can go ahead and get started. First thing I want to do is take some liquid white on my 2-inch brush, and I'm going to begin distributing that liquid white across that oval. Get a very thin, even coat of that liquid white so that we have a nice slick surface to get started on. Show you what colors we're working with today. I've got some titanium white, phthalo blue, mountain mixture, some Van Dyke brown, dark sienna, sap green, a little bit of alizarin crimson, cad yellow, yellow ochre, and bright red. And I'm going to go into some of the bright phthalo blue, pull down a little puddle of that, tap that right into those bristles. Nice even coverage there. And I'm just going to start dancing that around up in my sky. Let's start near those edges, keep those nice and dark. Down in the bottom, we're going to have some water, so I'm going to start from the outside and sweep in, leaving a little bit of a shimmer in the middle there. Switching to a good, clean, dry 1-inch or 2-inch brush, and we're going to blend that background. Just enough pressure to soften and bend those bristles, bringing that all together, blending right over those light spots, and then nice long strokes right over the water. I'm going to grab fan brush. I'm going to throw some clouds up there. I want to load that brush both sides nice and full. Give it a wiggle. Work it back and forth. Very, very, very full of that titanium white. And using the corner and kind of bouncing around. Just kind of focusing on that top corner there. The top edge of the cloud is the most important part. Keep it moving. Don't stay in one spot too long. And then with the big 2-inch brush, using just that top corner, I'm going to blend away the bottoms, trying not to touch the tops of any of those clouds. We want to blend away that bottom so you can't really tell where the bottom is anymore. Fluff those clouds, very little pressure. And then big sweeping crisscross strokes, we're just going to hypnotize those clouds. Now I'm not going to put any mountains in this scene because these walls are going to get in the way of the palette knife, so I've opted to not put any mountains in this scene. So I'm instead going to load up my fan brush with some mountain mix. Mountain mixture is not a color Bob used on the show, it's a color he made on the show. In almost every episode, he would mix equal parts Midnight Black, Prussian Blue, Van Dyke Brown, half part of alizarin crimson, and make something that he just called dark, and said it didn't matter too much, that just mix all of your dark colors together. But now we have it in a tube, so might as well use it. And I'm going to use the top corner with a little downward stroke here, make some tap and crash trees. Just a little downward motion here. Don't overthink these at all. I'm just going to let that kind of fade out to the left and right. Vary up that height. My 2-inch brush and a little bit of a downward tap. Going to blend out that bottom a bit. Gentle upward stroke there. Going back to my fan brush. Put a little bit of a grassy hill right in front of that. You turn that into a reflection. So with my clean 2-inch brush, pulling straight down. And then very, very gently straight across, no diagonals. All right. With my palette knife, I'm going to grab a little liquid white. Add a little bit of titanium white to that. Cut across that, get a little roll on the top blade there. Using very, very flat horizontal strokes, I'm going to lay in a water line. No diagonals here. You can move the knife, just don't rotate it. Right. Switching knives. I got a bunch of knives and brushes going, so I don't have to clean them all. I'm going to take some of that mountain mixture, and I'm going to take some of the sap green, mix them together. Load up my fan brush with this greener version of the mountain mixture. And using vertical line, I'm just going to mark the top of my tree. Rotate my brush down so I can pay attention to just that top corner. Barely, barely touching. I'm going to zigzag down that tree using just the corner. More and more pressure, adding more and more of that brush as I move on down. Just zigzagging back and forth. Give it a friend. Same thing on the other side over here. This one I'm going to end a little bit higher. I think it'll have a little bit of an island or a piece of land sticking out right there. I think one more tree maybe right here. Gonna switch to a 1-inch brush. And with my 1-inch brush, I'm gonna go into that same color, pulling towards one of the narrow ends to round that corner. Get that little bush texture going. Turn that rounded corner up. I'm gonna stick some bushes. Like I said, I'm gonna make this a little bit of a peninsula sticking out right there. Pull straight down, then gently straight across. with another 1-inch brush. I'm going to grab just a little bit of that mountain mixture and then come down mostly cad yellow, touch of yellow ochre in there. Little touch of liquid white to thin this down a little bit. We want this pretty thin so it sticks right on top. Very little pressure, starting in the bright spots, just a little push. Think about the shape of your bushes. Change your color of your bushes occasionally. Maybe have a bright red one in a little bit deeper, just to make it stand out a little bit. Back into the bright yellow. Something like that. And come down here in the reflection and put a little highlight down there. Back to my 2-inch brush, pull straight down. And straight across. Palette knife. Need to put a little bit of a shore on there. So I'm going to pull in some Van Dyke Brown. Again, this wall is kind of in the way, so I'm going to have to kind of think about the angles I'm holding the knife. Need a highlight color, so I'm going to take some dark sienna, take a little bit of the white, marble them together. Very, very marbly. Try to figure out the angle here. There we go. No pressure at all. Mostly horizontal here. That. Clean off the knife. Grab a little bit of that liquid white mixture. Throw in a little bit of a water line right underneath here. Remember, keep that flat and horizontal, even if your shoreline is diagonal. Okay. Going back to my 1-inch brush that I have that dark green mixture in. Grab a little bit more of that. Push towards that rounded side. And put some bushes in the foreground here. Fill in that corner. Switching back to the 1-inch brush with the yellow in it. Grab some yellow mixture. Very little pressure. Start in the brighter areas. Work into the darker areas. Change that color a bit. Grab a little of the yellow ochre. Grab a little bright red. Like so. Clean palette knife. I'm going to scratch some sticks and twigs into the bushes, starting in the darker areas and just kind of flicking towards the brighter areas. Like so. All right. So next step, I'm going to peel that contact paper off very carefully, trying not to get paint on the white background. So, all right. I'm going to go back to my fan brush that has the dark green on it. And let's rebuild some of these trees. Just using that corner. Barely touching, barely zigzagging, and then adding more and more pressure as you move on down. All right. Going back to a palette knife, grabbing some of that marble brown mixture, and I'm just going to stick some trunks on some of these trees. Just kind of touching. A little bit of a vertical movement can help it stick sometimes. Sawing up near the tops of these trees help make them look a little pointier. And I'm going to grab a fan brush. Just a little bit of that dark color, and then mostly cad yellow. Wiggle on both sides, work it back and forth, very, very full. Decide where your light source is, highlight mostly on that side, but remember to cross your trunk, highlight a little bit on both sides, but mostly on the one side. Do the tree that's behind first, then do the tree that's in front. Alright, I'm going to reset, flip my lid around, and we'll paint the top. Be right back. Alright, so I have reset, cleaned my palette a bit. I have flipped my lid over. On this side, what I did is I put down the contact paper oval first, then I painted with black gesso just over that area where I will be painting. First thing we need to do is get a nice thin, even coat of liquid clear across the whole surface of the canvas. And this needs quite a bit less than the liquid white. So I will, grab a paper towel and just blot that off. Alright, I'm going to grab a little bit of crimson on my my 1-inch brush, pull down a little puddle, tap that into that, rotate that brush, get a nice even coat. A little bit right in the center of the sky there. And then go into the phthalo blue, bright blue to overpower that red. Go right around that. Right across the crimson, and then along the bottom. Switching to a clean 1-inch brush. I'm going to load it up with some titanium white. Nice and full. I'm just going to lay in a bright spot in the sky. Switching to a big, clean, dry 2-inch brush to blend. Starting back in the center there. Got a nice sky going there. Gonna grab my palette knife and my mountain mixture. Pull that mountain mixture, cut across it, get a roll of paint, and we can start laying in our mountains. Scrape off that excess. So. Grabbing a 2-inch brush, we're going to blend this, getting right up next to that mountain without touching the edge, pulling it down and out. Do that to each mountain in both directions. And just blend that bottom till it disappears. I'm going to take a small amount of mountain mixture, a small amount of blue, to create a slightly blue-gray white mixture. Just so it's not so stark white and bright. Cut across that with no pressure at all. I'm just going to let that float right across that surface. Start just slightly outside, give it a little wiggle, let it float on down. Use a small blade to get right up in here. Grab some white, grab a little bit of blue. Small touch of mountain mixture into that to gray it. Pull that flat like a runway, cut across it. No pressure at all. Just wherever we think there might be some shadows. Get right up into the peaks of those mountains. Alright, I'm going to switch back to the white. Something like that. Come back to my 2-inch brush and tapping. I'm just going to go right up the edges, grabbing just that bottom of the snow and letting it just drift right off. Gently lift. I'm going to get some foothills in there, so I'm going to grab a 1-inch brush and some of this mountain mixture. And drop some mountain mix in here. Need little foothills. Something like that. Grab a fan brush with some white on it. And a touch of liquid white so it sticks just a bit better. And grassy areas right at the base of these hills. Gonna take a brush with a little bit of white left on it, and I'm gonna pull straight down to make some reflections. Flat, long horizontal strokes right over that. With my palette knife, I'm gonna grab a small amount of liquid white, work that into some slightly dirty titanium white, cut across that, and drop in a waterline, keeping this nice and horizontal. No diagonals, keeping it nice and flat. Moving around the shoreline, not rotating. All right. My fan brush, I'm going to load it up with some mountain mixture, nice and full. Give it a wiggle on both sides, work it back and forth. Alright, I'm going to decide where my tree is. Mark the top of it, using just that top corner. Zigzag down that tree. Using more and more pressure until you start using that whole brush, bringing that tree on down. And give him a little friend. If you need to go over it a spot a couple times to get rid of some of that white, you can. Alright. I feel like we need one more tree over here. Right there. Right in between them. Switch into a palette knife. Grab a little bit of a dark sienna, grab in a little bit of white, marble those together. Very marbly, cut across, very small roll of paint. Mark some tree trunks. Saw the tops of those trees to make them sharp and pointy. Fan brush. With just a touch of liquid white, some blue, some white. Load that up very full, wiggle on both sides, work it back and forth to a nice chiseled edge. Think about your light source. Highlight mostly on that side, but a little bit on both sides. Bounce around. Start with that corner. And we'll add more and more pressure as you work down, leaving some gaps here and there. Alright. Go into 1-inch brush with some dark color in it, pulling through that mountain mixture towards the one rounded corner, the narrow corner to round it. Turn that up. Drop some bushes right down in here around the feet of these trees. Switching 1-inch brushes to the one with the white in it. Little bit of liquid white in there. Load that up. Notice how I'm not really caring about it being pure white. Very little pressure, working out from the brighter areas. Like so. With a clean knife, I'm going to scratch some sticks and twigs, starting in the darker areas, flicking outwards. Maybe a couple longer things in between there. Maybe a tree back there. Alright. Script liner brush. Going to use some liquid clear because liquid clear does not like paint thinner. So I can grab some of my bright red, fill it nice and full, twirl to a point. Alright, and now our final step. Let's pull this contact paper off. Alright. Get this cleaned up and I'll show you the final product.